Mark Palmer drove home under a sky streaked with pink and gold. The workday had pressed on him like a heavy weight. His mind kept circling back to his family, Rena's quiet smile when he returned, Liam's bright laugh echoing in the hallway. These thoughts pulled him forward through evening traffic. Today, he had chosen something special from the little Italian shop on Elm Street, hoped it would make up for the hours he spent staring at screens. When he reached the restaurant, he parked his car and took a deep breath. The warm smell of garlic and herbs floated out as he opened the door. He spotted Maria, the owner, behind the counter. Waved and called out, "Mark, your usual?" He shook his head, careful to sound casual. "Actually, Maria, I thought I'd try the shrimp. Linguine tonight." He watched her eyes widen a bit. She knew Rena's allergy history. He forced a confident smile. "She'll be fine," he said, even though his heart beat faster. Maria ladled pasta into a to-go box with practiced ease. She sprinkled just the right amount of grated cheese and placed extra garlic bread on top. Mark paid and carried the bag carefully to his car. He felt a mix of excitement and worry. He remembered the small episode years ago when Rena had broken out in hives after eating shrimp at a friend's party. But over time, he believed she had grown past it. He did not mention his doubt to Maria as she thanked him and warned, "Take care." On the drive home, Mark kept glancing at the bag on the passenger seat. He imagined Rena unwrapping the pasta, her eyes opening wide in delight. He pictured Liam's face when he tasted the rich sauce. He smiled as he thought of the laughter they would share. But a small knot of fear twisted in his stomach. He told himself that sometimes people outgrow childhood allergies. He had checked with Rena a few weeks ago, and she had laughed off his worry. Still, he felt tension in his chest. As he turned into his quiet street, the houses stood in neat rows under the fading light. Flower beds and trimmed lawns lined the sidewalks. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves above. Mark pulled into the driveway and switched off the engine. He sat for a moment, breathing deeply. He pressed his hand to his chest, silencing the fight-or-flight urge. He forced himself to stand up, armed with the dinner that he hoped would show his love. Da! Inside, the hallway light glowed softly. Rena's slippers shuffled around and Liam's small footsteps sounded on the wood floor. Rena looked up from the living room sofa where she had been helping Liam with a puzzle. She greeted him with a tired but warm smile. "You're home early," she said, setting aside the puzzle box. Liam rushed forward, his backpack swinging on one shoulder. "Is that dinner?" he asked, eyes wide with hope. Mark knelt to hug them both. Liam gave him a quick, enthusiastic squeeze before letting go. Rena held him a moment longer. She smelled like lavender and soap. Mark placed the bag on the kitchen counter and reached for a clean plate. He felt his worry fade a little. Maybe he had been wrong to doubt Rena. She seemed happy and healthy as she set the plates on the table. Liam chattered about his day, about a new art project at school. Rena listened, her voice calm and soft. Mark opened the pasta box. The shrimp lay on top of the linguine, their pink color and slight sear looking delicious. He served generous portions onto the plates and handed one to Liam and one to Rena. "I thought we'd try something new tonight," he said. Liam peered at the shrimp with shining eyes. "This looks amazing," he said, gently touching one piece with his fork. Rena accepted her plate with a polite smile. Her smile made Mark's heart lift. He sat down and picked up his fork. They ate in a comfortable silence at first. Liam took the first bite and his face lit up. He chewed slowly, nodding with approval. Rena followed, picking up a piece of shrimp delicately. Mark watched her reaction. She closed her eyes, savored the taste, and smiled again. For a moment, relief washed over him. The meal was a hit. They talked about simple things, Liam's favorite teacher, the weather forecast for the weekend, a funny joke Rena had heard earlier. Mark listened and laughed, his earlier tensions slipping away. The room felt warm and bright. Outside, the last light of day slipped behind the houses. Inside, the soft hum of family life made him forget the worries of work. He watched Liam wipe his mouth with a napkin, and Rena reaching for another piece of garlic bread. Everything seemed perfect. Mark leaned back in his chair, a contented sigh escaping him. Thought, "I'll remember this moment always." Halfway through the meal, Mark noticed Rena set her fork down. She blinked and leaned forward slightly. Concern flickered in his chest. He asked, "Are you okay?" Rena's eyes focused on him, her smile slipping. She touched her throat as if it felt strange. Liam's spoon paused in midair. Mark's relief fled. He stood up and reached for her hand, trying to keep his voice calm. "Tell me what's wrong," he said gently. Rena's face showed unease. She opened her mouth to reply, but no words came out. Liam looked from his mother to his father, his face creased with worry. Mark knelt beside Rena's chair and placed a hand on her back. He felt a cold sweat break on his own brow. His mind raced back to the old warning. Shrimp could cause a reaction. He gripped the table edge, his fingers white. His calm voice cracked as he said, "Rena, just breathe. Help is coming." But Rena's eyes fluttered shut. Liam gasped and stood up, crying out, "Mom!" Scooped Rena into his arms and turned toward the living room couch. He spoke into his phone with rushed words. "I need an ambulance. My wife and son, they ate shrimp, they're in trouble." His voice was low and urgent, but he tried to stay clear. As he moved, Liam reached up, small arms wrapping around his mother's waist. Mark held them close and waited for the siren he hoped to hear. Silence filled the room, except for Liam's soft sobs. Mark cradled his family, heart pounding. He thought of all the dinners they had shared, of lazy weekends and slow mornings. Now everything stood still. The shrimp linguine sat forgotten on the table. The garlic bread crumbs lay scattered on the plates. Outside, the street was quiet. Inside, Mark wished for one more peaceful moment before everything changed. Mark's heart raced as he held Rena close. Her body felt limp in his arms. He shifted her onto the couch and turned to Liam, whose face was drained of color. Liam clutched his mother's hand, his small knuckles white. Mark reached out to steady him, he whispered, "Breathe with me, son. Deep breaths." Liam nodded, though his eyes were wide with fear. Mark checked Rena's pulse at her wrist. It felt rapid but faint. He pressed his thumb gently, counting under his breath. Then he dialed emergency services again, his fingers trembling. The dispatcher's calm voice came through the line. Mark spoke quickly. "My wife and son collapsed after eating dinner. They have trouble breathing. Please hurry," he gave their address, breathless and precise. He ended the call and ran to the window. He peered out but saw no sign of sirens. He turned back to the room, his mind a jumble of dread. Liam knelt beside Rena, tears falling silently. Mark knelt too and touched Rena's shoulder, hoping for any sign of response. Her lips were pale, and her eyelids fluttered but did not open. Outside, a red pickup truck rolled to a stop across the street. Two neighbors, Mrs. Gomez and Mr. Patel, hurried toward the house. They knocked urgently at the door. Mark shouted, "Come in, please." The front door swung open and they rushed inside. Mrs. Gomez looked at Rena and gasped. She knelt beside Mark and took Liam's other hand. Mr. Patel pulled out his phone and snapped on the flashlight, shone it over Rena's face, while Mrs. Gomez checked her breathing. Liam watched, his eyes brimming with tears. He whispered, "Mom, please wake up." Mark's chest felt tight as he watched the scene. He could not believe how fast things had changed. Just minutes ago, they had been sharing a laugh over pasta. Now his wife and son lay still. He swallowed, trying to clear his throat. He thought back to the warning about shrimp. Why had he ignored it? Guilt stabbed at him. He shook his head. As if to clear the thought away, he had called for help. That was all he could do now. A faint rumble grew louder in the distance. Sirens sliced through the quiet evening. The sound felt like hope and terror at the same time. The front door burst open as two paramedics in bright jackets rushed in carrying a medical bag and a stretcher. They worked quickly, moving with practiced skill. One paramedic knelt by Rena, checking her airway. The other spoke softly to Liam, kneeling close. "Sweetie, can you tell me your name?" Liam sobbed. "Liam." The paramedic nodded and calmed him with gentle words. Mark stood back, watching every move. He felt numb as he watched the paramedics check his family. One placed an oxygen mask on Rena's face. He watched her chest rise and fall with each forced breath. Relief mingled with fear in his chest. Paramedic turned to Mark. Sir, does your wife have a history of allergies? Mark nodded. Yes, she had a shrimp reaction years ago, but I thought she was fine. His voice broke. The paramedic gave him a serious look. We need to get them both to the hospital now. Can you help us? Mark swallowed and nodded. He moved aside, letting them strap Rena to the stretcher. The paramedics lifted Rena gently and carried her toward the door. One stayed with Liam. His mother on the stretcher, Liam watched so intently that he did not notice the second paramedic offering him an oxygen mask. Just hold this under your nose, okay? The paramedic said. Liam placed it carefully. His breathing eased a little. The paramedics wrapped a blanket around his shoulders and settled him on a small chair. Mark knelt beside him again. You're doing great, buddy, he said, placing his hand on Liam's small back. The back of the ambulance glowed with red and white lights in the street. The paramedics loaded Rena inside. Liam reached out and touched her hand. Rena's fingers twitched. Though she did not wake, the paramedic with Liam looked at Mark. Sir, can your son come with you? Mark wiped his eyes and answered yes. He helped lift Liam into the ambulance. The paramedic closed the door, and the siren wailed as the vehicle sped away. Mark stood on the porch, watching until the lights vanished around the corner. The neighbors were still by his side. Mrs. Gomez put her hand on his shoulder. I'm so sorry, she said softly. Mr. Patel offered to drive Mark to the hospital. Mark shook his head, voice steady now. I'll follow in my car. He turned and went back inside. He grabbed his keys from the hall table. His legs felt like lead as he walked out again and got into his car. He pressed his forehead to the steering wheel, closed his eyes, and drew in a shaky breath. Then he started the engine and drove after the ambulance. The drive to the hospital felt endless. Mark watched the road ahead, red brake lights in front. Of him, he thought of every time he had taken Rena and Liam out to dinner or to the park. He remembered how Rena would laugh at Liam's jokes. He remembered Liam's wide eyes when he learned something new at school. Guilt tugged at him again. Why had he taken the risk? He forced himself not to think too much. He had to be there for them now. At the hospital entrance, he followed signs to the emergency room. The parking lot looked crowded. He found a spot and ran into the glass doors. Inside, the nurse at the desk guided him to a small waiting area. He recognized Mrs. Gomez and Mr. Patel, already seated there. They rose as he approached. He thanked them quietly. They shook his hand and nodded. He sat down with them and folded his hands in his lap. Minutes felt like hours. Other families came and went, and nurses called names into treatment rooms. Mark kept checking the clock on the wall. His stomach twisted. He thought of the phone. Call the paramedic had made. He hoped both Rena and Liam were stable. He opened his phone and stared at the home screen. He saw a text message from his boss about tomorrow's meeting. He deleted it without reading. Meetings did not mean anything now. Finally, a doctor in green scrubs appeared. Mork. She approached the waiting area with a clipboard. Mark stood up, and his heart thudded. Sister gave him a gentle look. Mr. Palmer? She asked. He nodded. Voice, barely a whisper. I'm Dr. Alvarez. I treated your wife and son. Mark swallowed. The doctor continued. Both of them had an acute allergic reaction. We gave epinephrine and oxygen. They are stable now. Rena is resting in room 5. Liam is awake but tired in room 6. Mark exhaled. Relief washed over him so strongly that he felt lightheaded. Dr. Alvarez smiled kindly. You did the right thing by calling us quickly. We will keep them under observation for a few hours. If all goes well, they can go home tomorrow. Mark nodded, tears pricking his eyes. Thank you so much. The doctor placed a hand on his shoulder. You're not alone. That was a scary reaction. But they will be okay. Mark stood still, breathing in the promise of those words. Later, Mark entered Rena's room. She lay on a crisp white bed, an IV line in her arm, and small tubes by her nose. Her eyes opened slowly. She reached out her hand toward him. He took it gently. He looked at her face, relieved to see color returning to her cheeks. He leaned forward and kissed her forehead. I'm here, he he said softly. Rena squeezed his hand and whispered, "I'm sorry, Mark," shook his head. "Don't be. I'm so glad you're okay." Then he walked down the hall to Liam's room. He found Liam sitting up, the oxygen mask removed, wrapped in a blanket. Liam managed a small smile when he saw his father. Mark pulled up a chair and sat beside him. "Hey, buddy," he said. Liam's voice was soft. "Will Mom be okay?" Mark nodded. "Yes, she'll be fine. The doctors say she just needs rest." Liam leaned into his father. Mark hugged him gently. Liam closed his eyes and rested his head on Mark's shoulder. Mark stroked his hair, thinking that he would never let this happen again. He would learn everything he could about Rena's needs. This time he would put safety first, always. Mark sat on the edge of Rena's hospital bed, his hand still holding hers from the ride over. The steady beep of the monitor beside her was a small comfort after the chaos of the evening. Liam slept in the next room under a soft blanket, his breathing calm now that the worst had passed. Mark's mind kept replaying the moments at home, the sudden collapse, the frantic calls, the red lights flashing through the window. But one moment stayed louder than all the others, the phone call he made from his living room. The words he spoke that night while he was still afraid for his family. Back in the living room, the moment had been frozen in 1,000 little details. The old oak table, the half-eaten shrimp linguine, and the extra garlic bread thrown aside in panic. He had reached instinctively for Rena's phone on the counter. His thumb swiped the screen with shaking fingers. The fear in his voice had been raw. "My wife and son, they're not breathing right. Please send help." Then, after confirming their address, something strange fell from his lips. He heard the dispatcher ask, "Sir, is there anyone else in the house who might be at risk?" He paused, his heart pounding so hard it felt like it could burst through his ribs. He looked down at his wife, pale and unresponsive, and at his son, whose eyes were wide with terror. In that moment, he thought about everything he had worked for: his reputation, his small standing in the neighborhood, his image as a good father and caring husband. He thought, if Rena and Liam survive, people will ask questions. The newspapers, the neighbors, everyone will want a story. Swallowed. Then said in a low voice, "Yes, I need to know if this could become a big story. I can't have bad press if they pull through." He remembered the click of the neighbor's door opening, the gasp from Mrs. Gomez as she saw Rena slumped on the couch. He remembered the confusion in the dispatcher's voice. "Sir, focus on getting help. We're on our way." But then as he lowered the phone, he heard it on speaker. His words echoed in the room. A stifled murmur came from Mr. Patel in the hallway. He saw Maria, from the Italian shop, step back in shock. The silence that followed felt heavier than his fear for Rena and Liam. Mark had never meant to say it out loud. He had meant to think it, maybe in a private moment of panic. But spoken aloud, his worry about reputation sounded like a lie. It sounded like he cared more for his own image than for his wife and child lying motionless on his couch. He looked up to see their faces, neighbors, friends frozen in shock. Mrs. Gomez's eyes brimmed with tears. Mr. Patel held his hand over his mouth. Maria's face was pale, her hand clutching the phone box she held. Mark's chest tightened. With shame, he fumbled with the speaker button and whispered, "Sorry. I'm sorry." But the damage was done. The paramedics still came fast, lights flashing through the front window, sirens sharpening the night. They carried Rena and Liam out to the waiting ambulance. Mark followed, worry carving lines into his face, but his shame followed him too, heavy and unrelenting. Now, in the quiet of the hospital room, Mark tried to hold on to something strong. He pressed a kiss to Rena's cool cheek and whispered, "I am so sorry." Rena's hand twitched. She opened her eyes, blinking against the soft light. He let out a breath of relief and wiped his own tears. He could not hide what he had said. He wondered if she had heard him, even in her haze. Rena's voice was small. "Mark." She searched his face. He knelt beside her, brushing hair from her forehead. "I know," he said. "I said something terrible that night." She frowned, trying to understand. "What do you mean?" He took a deep breath. "On the phone, I asked about press, about bad stories." He looked down at his hands. "Was scared. but I also panicked about what people might say if something happened to you or Liam." She reached up to touch his cheek. "You were scared for us," she said. "That's what parents do." He shook his head. "No, I said it out loud in front of the neighbors and the dispatcher. It sounded selfish." He swallowed, trying to steady his voice. "I'm sorry." Rena turned her head slightly, studying him with tired eyes. "We survived. That matters more than anything else." He closed his eyes, letting her words sink in. She was right. But he still felt the ache of shame. He thought back once more to that phone call. How each word had bounced off the walls of their home, how it had traveled over the airwaves, into the dispatcher's speaker. He had risked more than their lives in that moment. He had risked trust. Rena squeezed his hand. "We know you love us," she said. "Sometimes fear makes us say things we don't mean." He nodded, though his heart still pounded. How could he live with himself after caring about a story headline when his own family was fighting for their lives? Later that day, he found himself in a small consultation room with the hospital's public relations officer. Mark had called on his way to the hospital, feeling he needed to address the stray words on the phone. The officer sat across from him, a polite smile on her face. "Mr. Palmer," she began, "we understand that you expressed concern about media coverage." Mark bowed his head. "Yes, I panicked. I'm ashamed of what I said." The officer nodded. "I want to assure you, sir, that patient privacy is our top priority. We will not share any details without your consent." Mark's shoulders sagged. He closed his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for telling me that." The officer gave him a folder with hospital press policy and contact information. "If you need anything at all, let us know." Mark left the room feeling lighter, though his heart still ached at the memory of his own words. When he returned to Rena's room, he found her gazing out the window. Where the late afternoon light painted the sky in shades of pink, just like the evening he brought home dinner. He sat beside her again. "I took care of it," he said. Rena looked at him curiously, explained what the public relations officer had said. Rena's face softened. "You did the right thing," she said. "But you did it because you love us, not because you want headlines." He reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "I promise, from now on, that if I ever feel that panic again, I will remember that you and Liam matter more than anything else." She nodded. "We know," she said. "And we love you, even when you mess up." He leaned forward, brushing his lips to her hand. He knew how lucky he was. A few hours later, Liam broke into the room with a shy grin. He stood by the doorway, his eyes bright despite the 4 in his arm. "Daddy?" he asked softly. Mark smiled and scooped him into a hug. "Hey, champ," he said. "How are you feeling?" "Better," Liam said, his voice small but steady. He looked at his mother. "Is Mommy okay?" Rena reached for his hand. "I'm okay," she said. "Thanks to you, sweetie." Mark stood behind Liam and embraced them both. In that moment, the awkward memory of his phone call seemed small compared to the warmth of his family's forgiveness. That night, back home in their own beds, Mark lay awake staring at the ceiling. He heard Rena's steady breathing beside him and Liam's soft snore from the next room. He thought about everything they had been through. He thought about the kitchen, the pasta boxes, the flash of the ambulance lights. He thought about his own fear, which had led him to care more about reputation in that moment than about the 2 people he loved most. He closed his eyes and made a vow to himself. He would never let worry about what others thought eclipse his care for his family's well-being. He would learn everything he could about allergies and first aid. He would listen to Rena's concerns. He would cherish every moment with Liam. And if he ever felt panic creeping in again, he would replace it with love first, always as sleep finally claimed him. Mark's last thought was of his family's smiles. Rena's gentle smile that morning when she woke. Liam's sleepy grin when he saw his father by his bedside. His own smile in the mirror when he realized how close he had come to losing them. He drifted off, believing that this moment of reckoning, painful as it had been, had changed him forever. And that change would guide him for the rest of his life. Mark opened the front door slowly, pushing the light switch so the hallway glowed softly. Rena held Liam's hand and stepped inside behind him. They carried simple bags from the hospital, blankets folded over their arms. Home felt both familiar and strange after the chaos of the ambulance and the hospital rooms. Liam peeked around the corner into the living room, where the pasta box still lay on the table. He pointed at it with wide eyes. Mark gave a quiet laugh and knelt beside him. "I thought we'd try something safer next time," he said gently. Liam smiled, relieved, and hugged his father's neck. Rena set her bag down and took a slow breath. The living room was clean and bright under the evening lamp. The couch looked soft, and there was a faint smell of soap from the cleaners Mrs. Gomez and Mr. Patel had brought over earlier. Mark had wanted the house to look perfect before they returned. He had washed dishes, wiped the table, and even planted fresh flowers in a vase. Now, he stood back and watched Rena and Liam settle in. He still felt a knot of guilt in his stomach, tied tight by what he said on the phone. They moved to the table and sat together, Liam between them. Mark had brought out cups of warm milk for the children, and Rena had sliced soft bread for herself. None of them were hungry enough for a full meal, but they needed the comfort of a simple routine. Liam sipped his milk, and Rena took a small bite of bread. Mark poured himself a cup of tea and watched his family. Felt lucky to see them safe in their own home. At the same time, he knew he had to face what came next. The phone in Mark's pocket buzzed, and he saw a message from Maria at the Italian shop. It read, "Are you both okay? I heard what happened." "I'm so sorry," he typed back. "We're fine now. Thank you for caring." Then another message came, this one from a neighbor group chat where whispers had already started. "Did you hear about the shrimp incident? Scary that he complained about bad press. I can't believe he worried about newspapers over his family." Mark stared at the screen. His private worry had become public gossip in minutes. He felt exposed and ashamed. Rena noticed his pale face and reached over to touch his arm. "Is it?" she asked softly. He slid his phone across the table without a word. She read the messages, her brow furrowing. "People are talking," she said. Then she looked at him calmly. "They will talk. That is out of our control." He nodded, tears welling in his eyes. "I know, but I feel terrible." Rena took his hand. "You saved our lives. That is what matters. The rest, let it go." Mark squeezed her hand. He wanted to believe her, but he could not ignore the hurt in his own heart. The next morning, Mark decided to face the situation head on. He asked Rena to go with him to see Mrs. Gomez and Mr. Patel, who had offered to help in any way. They walked next door, Liam skipping between them. Mrs. Gomez answered the door with open arms. She hugged Rena and kissed Liam on the forehead. "I'm so glad you're home," she said. Her voice was warm, free of judgment. Mr. Patel came around the corner with fresh fruit for the family. "We worry about our neighbors," he said. "We're just glad everyone is okay." Mark felt a weight lift slightly. Genuine concern felt very different from idle gossip. On their way back, Mark stopped by the Italian shop. Ria was arranging bread baskets when she saw him. She looked at him with kind eyes. "I was so worried," she said. "I know about allergies. I should have reminded you again." Mark shook his head. "No, you did warn me. I was the one who thought she was okay." He paused. "I want to apologize for everything." Maria smiled and reached out to squeeze his arm. "We learn from mistakes," she said. "You did the right thing by being careful next time. It shows you love them." Mark left the shop feeling lighter and more determined to learn. In the days that followed, Mark took steps to change. He signed up for a first aid class at the community center and invited Rena to join him. She agreed, smiling at his effort. He also called the local allergy clinic to set up an appointment for Rena and Liam. They would have new tests and learn how to avoid triggers. Mark wrote down every detail he heard, determined never to be careless again. At night, he studied the pamphlets and practiced the steps. He felt nervous at first, but each time he practiced, his confidence grew. Meanwhile, the neighborhood chatter died down as people saw the family's genuine progress. Mrs. Gomez stopped by with cookies and praised their efforts. Mr. Patel waved from his porch and asked how the classes were going. No one mentioned the phone call again. It felt as though their community had forgiven them when they saw Mark's real change. Rena noticed this too. She leaned on Mark one evening as they watched Liam ride his bike on the sidewalk. She said, "People see how much you care now." He nodded and kissed her forehead, grateful for her support. One afternoon, Rena and Mark hosted a small lunch at home for a few neighbors. Everyone brought simple dishes: salads, bread, fruit. They ate outside on folding chairs, enjoying the warm breeze. Liam ran around, laughing, as he played tag with other children. The mood was light and friendly. Mark smiled as Rena told a funny story about something Liam did at school. He realized how precious these moments were. The crisis had taught him that life could change in a blink, and that he must never take these moments for granted. That evening, after the guests left, Mark sat with Rena on the porch swing. The sky was deep blue, and stars began to appear. They held hands and rocked gently. Rena looked at him with steady eyes. "I know it was hard for you," she said, "but you have grown from it." He nodded, his voice quiet. I feel like I'm learning to be the husband and father you both deserve." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "We love you," she whispered. "All of you, shame and all." He closed his eyes, letting her words sink in like balm on old wounds. In the weeks after, Mark's lessons stuck. He kept an emergency kit in the kitchen, stocked with allergy medicine and clear instructions on how to use it. He reviewed the first aid steps with Rena and Liam once a week, making it a game so Liam would remember. He praised Liam when he reminded him where the kit was. He also stopped bringing shrimp home, choosing new dishes instead until they were confident no allergy would strike again. Each small choice reminded him of that night and how much he had learned. One afternoon, Mark sat at his desk at home, reviewing a meeting agenda on his laptop. He paused and closed the file. He thought about how he had once worried more about press than his family's safety, shivered at the memory, grateful he had learned the lesson. He picked up his phone and opened a blank note. He typed family first, love over image. Then he wrote bullet points underneath: listen to Rena's needs, refresh first aid skills, check ingredients each time, cherish small moments. He saved the note and smile filled his face. The next weekend, the family went to the park for a picnic. They sat on a blanket under a large oak tree. Mark and Rena watched Liam chase butterflies and collect dandelions. They laughed together, sharing simple sandwiches and fruit. When Liam found a ladybug crawling on his hand, Mark gently moved it to a leaf and let it crawl away. Rena held Mark's hand and whispered, "We are safe and happy." Mark squeezed her hand back. "I promise always to keep it this way," he said softly. She nodded, and Liam ran back to them, holding a bouquet of wildflowers as the sun began to set. They packed up and walked home side by side. The sky glowed in pinks and purples, full of calm promise. Mark looked at his wife and son, their faces lit by the soft light. He felt that knot of guilt had been untied by love and care. He knew he would carry the memory of that night forever, but it would remind him not of shame, but of how much his love could grow. And with that thought, they reached their front door, ready to face whatever came next together. Mark Palmer woke early to the soft light of dawn filtering through the bedroom curtains. The house was still and quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. He slid out of bed and checked on Liam first, lay peacefully under his blanket, breathing softly. Mark paused at the door, watching him for a moment. He remembered the fear in Liam's eyes when he first collapsed. Now, seeing him safe and asleep, relief washed over Mark's heart. He tiptoed to Rena's side. She stirred and opened her eyes, giving him a gentle smile. "Morning," she whispered, her voice calm. Mark kissed her forehead and squeezed her hand. "Morning," he replied softly. He left the room to make breakfast, feeling a lightness he had not felt in weeks. He wanted to make this morning special, a fresh start for the family. In the kitchen, Mark gathered eggs, whole wheat bread, and fresh fruit. He cracked the eggs into a bowl and whisked them with a pinch of salt. He heated a pan and poured in the mixture, the smell of cooked eggs soon filling the air. He toasted the bread and sliced strawberries and bananas. He set everything neatly on plates and carried them to the dining table, humming to himself. Rena and Liam joined him at the table. Liam's eyes opened slowly when he smelled the food. He sat up, rubbing his eyes. "Breakfast smells good," he said, sitting down eagerly. Rena reached for her plate and took a small bite, nodding in approval. Mark poured orange juice into their glasses and took his seat at the head of the table. The family ate together, talking about the day ahead. Liam described how he wanted to build a model airplane with his grandfather. Rena said she would call the allergy clinic later to confirm their follow-up appointment. Grateful for their normal routine, after breakfast they cleaned up together. Liam cleared his plate and wiped the table with a cloth Mark handed him. Rena washed the dishes while Mark dried and put them away. There was a sense of teamwork in the kitchen, as though they were fixing not just dishes, but bonds that had strained under fear. When they finished, Mark wrapped his arms around Rena and kissed her cheek. "Thank you for being my partner," he said. She smiled up at him. "Always," she replied softly. The day was bright and sunny, perfect for a family outing. Mark suggested they go to the community center's open day. They packed a small bag with water, snacks, and the first aid booklet Mark had been studying. Liam slid into his bike helmet, and Rena carried the bag. They walked out the front door together, hand in hand, feeling united and hopeful. At the community center, tables were set up for different activities. There was a table for health checks, another for arts and crafts, and one for first aid demonstrations. Mark led his family to the first aid table. A friendly instructor greeted them. "Welcome. Would you like a quick review?" he asked. Mark nodded enthusiastically. He listened as the instructor showed how to use an epinephrine auto-injector, how to call for help, and how to keep an airway clear. Rena and Liam watched closely. Liam even practiced the hand positions for chest compressions on a practice dummy, giggling when the dummy let out a loud beep. Mark felt proud of his sons' eagerness to learn. After the demonstration, they walked around the center. Liam painted a colorful picture of a butterfly at the arts table. Rena and Mark chatted quietly as they watched, enjoying the simple pleasure of seeing their son happy. Later, they played a quick game of catch on the lawn outside. Liam ran and laughed, and Mark threw the ball gently so his son could catch it. Rena cheered from the side, clapping each time Liam made a good catch. As the afternoon sun began to lower, they found a bench under a large oak tree. They sat together, tired but content. Mark looked at Rena and Liam, the two people he loved most in the world. He felt a deep sense of peace. The memory of that night when they collapsed was still there, but it no longer held him in its grip. Instead, it was a reminder of what mattered most: their love and safety. "I feel lucky today," Rena said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Me too," Mark replied, wrapping his arm around her. He looked down at Liam, who was picking small daisies from the grass. "We have each other," he said. "Know how to take care of each other." Rena lifted her head and smiled. "Yes, we do." That evening, they returned home and prepared a simple dinner of grilled chicken, steamed vegetables, and brown rice. Mark marinated the chicken with herbs and olive oil, careful to avoid any risk of hidden allergens. Rena set the table with their best plates and lit a small candle in the center. Liam helped by pouring water into glasses. They ate slowly, savoring each bite and sharing stories from the day. When dinner was over, Liam asked for a bedtime story. Mark tucked him into bed and opened a book about space adventures. As he read, Liam's eyes grew heavy. Mark placed a gentle kiss on his forehead and whispered, "I love you, champ." Liam mumbled, "Love you, Dad," and drifted to sleep. Mark turned off the light and walked down the hall to his own room. Rena was waiting for him on the bed. They sat together, talking about their hopes for tomorrow. They spoke quietly, making plans for small things like trying a new recipe for breakfast, planting vegetables in the garden, and having a movie night on Friday. These plans, simple as they were, filled Mark with joy. The fear of losing his family had made him realize how precious each day truly was. Before sleep, Mark reached for the note he had created weeks earlier. "Family first, love over image." He read it silently, smiling at the bullet points. He felt proud of himself for sticking to his promise. He placed the note on his nightstand where he could see it each morning. Later that night, as Mark lay beside Rena, he thought back to a series of events that had shaken them so deeply. He thought about his own words on the phone the moment he had worried about bad press. He felt a pang of shame, but also gratitude. That moment of weakness had led to change. It had taught him to face his fears, admit his mistakes, and grow from them. He realized that true strength came not from hiding imperfections, but from acknowledging them and working to become better. In the morning, he would wake up and keep his promise again. He would choose care over pride, love over worry about what others thought. But for now, he closed his eyes and let sleep carry him into peaceful dreams, secure in the love of his family. And so, the Palmer family's life went on marked forever by one terrifying night, but defined by the love, growth, and unity that followed. They learned that even the darkest moments can lead to brighter days if they face them with honesty, courage, and an open heart. From that day forward, they carried each other through life, always remembering that reputation fades, but family lasts.